It's March 23rd. For us here in Stanton, Michigan, we're holding a non-traditional date for Passover, which will be a week from this coming Wednesday night. So we're basically 10 days away from hosting Passover. Then for most people, they will be celebrating Easter, Good Friday, and then Resurrection Sunday. And then others will be celebrating Passover a week out from there. There's different time frames. One of the things that excites me is that people are beginning to see the value of being obedient to what the scripture says about keeping the feasts of the Lord and how God meets with them specifically at that time. And I know when you're having your daily Bible studies that God's meeting with you. I know He's giving you insights and He's doing all kinds of wonderful things. I know that. But there's something special about Shabbat. There's something special about the feast. There's something special about those appointed times. And they're important. Very, very important. In fact, Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23 through 25 tells us that we should not forsake the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but as we see the day approaching of the Lord's return, that we would be more zealous and more devoted and more dedicated to actually meeting and not forsaking the assembling together. The body of Christ is a community. It's not a bunch of individuals. It's individuals working together as a community to be able to help and to secure and to support and to provide for the needs of the people. And you know what? That's pretty much what tonight's Torah portion is in Leviticus chapter 6. Leviticus chapter 6, beginning in verse 8. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, command Aaron and his sons, saying, this is the Torah of the burnt offering, the Korban Allah. It's the burnt offering because of the burnt offering upon the altar all night unto the morning, and the fire of the altar shall be burning in it. This is known as the Tamid offering. And we've talked about this in length, about how in the apostolic writings that Paul wrote, you and I are commanded to be like these Tamid offerings in the morning and the evening, laying down our lives and saying, here I am, Lord. Take me. I'm yours. I'm your servant. What do you want me to do? I'm willing to do it. It's all yours. None of it's for me. It's for you. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 tells us that you've been bought with a price. You don't belong to yourself anymore. So therefore, you're a servant of the Most High God. He gives all these different pictures so that we can understand our relationship to Him. And we can be meditating on those and saying, oh, I need to really work on this facet of my relationship a little bit more. One of the challenges, and I know this is a challenge over in Pakistan and a challenge over in India and in Africa, where I spend my time, at least overseas, and I've noticed that people expect handouts when it comes to the things of God. They expect the pastor or the evangelist or the teacher to be able to come on their own expense, paying their own bills, with all those different types of things. And the people are in the receive mode, but they're not in the give mode. And in this Torah portion tonight that we'll take a look at, I want to emphasize to you the value of, let me ask you a question. Do you understand the value of the individual teaching you? Is that valuable to you? Is it important to you? Is it something you take for granted and say, okay, well, if I, great, take it, don't take it, whatever the case is. In this week's Torah portion, we find that there are let's call them breadcrumbs. There's breadcrumbs from the king's table that the priests get. And what I want to help you understand is, just as there are 24 garments to the bride of Christ in Isaiah chapter 3, there are also 24 gratuities for the priest, for Aaron and his sons. Now, if we're a royal priesthood and we're a holy nation and we're a chosen generation and we're a peculiar treasure, wouldn't it make sense that that the people who are the ones you're teaching would be supporting you in doing what you do? That's a very significant question for overseas ministries, for ministries here in America. It's very, very important. And so in this Torah portion, the Lord is going to have Moses command Zav, Aaron and his sons. He's going to lay out all of these things regarding the Korban Allah, keeping the fire burning, changing your garments, taking the ashes out, doing the grain offering, the peace offering, the thanksgiving offering, the sin offering, the transgression or guilt offering, and all these laws concerning that. And within each one, the priest, with every offering that's brought outside of a korban olah, a burnt offering, they're going to get a portion because they don't have an inheritance. They don't have a full-time job. They just are dependent upon the people, kind of like a waiter or a waitress at a restaurant. Here comes the waiter and the waitress now. And as they're coming up, the waiter says, may I get you something to drink? And everything that the waiter does is to give you the best service possible with the hopes that you, as the customer, will grant them a gratuity to bless them. Now, that's not the reason why most pastors, teachers, evangelists, anybody like that who teaches is teaching for. However, it's very important for the people who are receiving from the teacher, from the rabbi, from the pastor, from the evangelist, from the Sunday school teacher, from the prayer meeting leader. They're receiving. So they should be giving back some of the breadcrumbs. Now, whenever they would bring a korban olah, a burnt offering, or they would bring a meal offering, or they bring a peace offering, or they bring a grain offering, or they bring a sin offering, or they would bring a transgression or guilt offering, any one of the offerings that they would bring, the priest would get a chance to be able to, after the first was given to God, then the priest would get the leftovers. And people say leftovers are always the best. So they would take the leftovers and they would get to do that. They would get to eat that. They would get the skins. They would get all the benefit of it. And so they were strong. These guys worked hard. I mean, we're a royal priesthood today. We definitely don't know what it's like to work hard as a priesthood, as a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a light to the Gentiles. We just don't know very well how that works. But in this reality of Moses commanding Aaron and his sons, these are the things that you're going to do. And with every offering, you have to do it like this. And when you do it like that, then you're going to be blessed. And when the people bring it, then I'm going to make sure that you get a portion. They're going to get a gratuity. They're going to get a tip. They're going to get something to be able to survive and thrive and bless them. That's what they're going to get. So the first thing I want you to think about before we even get into the teaching is just asking yourself the question: who are you supporting that's feeding you spiritually? That's really a good question. Are you regularly supporting the person who's feeding and teaching you spiritually? It's a great question. It's a question that we should all ask because we all are learning from somebody and probably on a consistent basis. So wouldn't it make sense that if those individuals are teaching us the difference between the clean and the unclean, the holy and the common, that we should be supporting them because of the time and the effort that they're putting in? It's a great question. So in this Torah portion and beyond, there are literally 24 gratuities that Aaron and his sons would receive because of the hard work that they did. And they weren't just working at the altar. They were working more than the altar because when they weren't at the altar, they were teaching the Torah. They were instructing the Torah. They were helping people understand the Torah. Now, because we live in the society that we do, and because our Bible studies don't pay the bills, receiving a Bible study, we don't tend to put a monetary value on those types of things. And because we don't put a monetary value on it, then the servant continues to serve, but not getting the gratuity of the good things that could and should be received because they're serving, they're giving, they're pouring out. So when the scripture is teaching us this, the amount that Aaron and his sons would get in Judaism and within the writings, they would call this the crumbs from the master's table. Now, that should immediately spark something in your mind. That should immediately take you over into the book of Matthew. So if I go over to Matthew chapter 15, I want to show you something, and I want to help you understand more about this passage, about what this is about. In Matthew chapter 15, I'm going to read verses 21 through 28. And I want you to notice something, and then I want you to notice these crumbs, and notice what this Syrophoenician woman is saying. Because when Aaron and his sons would get the crumbs from the master's table, so God would get offered the first, and then whatever was left over would be given to Aaron and his sons. These were called crumbs. And so now these crumbs, they would get it and they would be satisfied and they would have a great lunch and they'd have a great meal and they would eat in the holy place and they would get the skins and they could make their clothing and they could do all those different types of things. They were blessed in that particular way. Now look at Matthew chapter 15, beginning in verse 21. Then Yeshua went there and departed into the coast of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with a devil. First of all, this woman's putting herself out there. She's not an Israelite. She's a Canaanite. The Canaanites were the ones who were visibly, physically thrust from the promised land. And here's a Canaanite saying, My daughter is vexed with a demon. But he answered her not a word. And his disciples came and besought him, saying, Send her away, for she's crying after us. Don't let that woman even get near us. But he answered and said, I'm not sent but only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, which we've talked about in great details in times past. So Yeshua is saying, Sorry, Canaanite woman, I can't have anything to do with you. I've got to stay focused on what I'm supposed to be doing, and that is ministering only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So now the story goes on. Then she came, and what did she do? She worshiped him, saying, Lord, help me. Now, what she's doing is she's saying, okay, you've said I'm a Canaanite. I'm not a lost sheep of the house of Israel, but I recognize you. I'm a Canaanite. I recognize you as Lord. I'm going to bow down to you. I'm going to recognize you for being great. Help me. I need help. Verse 26, but he answered and said, It's not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs. Ah, this is a Hebrew idiom. Now, if you weren't an Israelite and you were just part of the pagan nations, you were known as dogs because you were unclean, and dogs are unclean. And so you would say, okay, Yeshua just said, you're a dog, and I don't spend any time with the dogs. And she says, after he says, and I'm not going to give you any crumbs from the king's table, from the children's table. Because remember, the children of Israel were supposed to be a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a chosen generation, for all the light to be a light to the Gentile nations. That was their responsibility. Isaiah 42:6. That was their responsibility. To be that representative, to be that priest, the way they dressed, the way they acted, the way they talked, the way they cared, the way they loved. but they were completely dependent upon the people, completely dependent upon the people, completely dependent upon the people to bring their offerings so that they could actually get a gratuity, one of the 24 different categories of gratuity. Now back to our story. So here's this woman, a Canaanite woman, and Yeshua says it's not right to give the dogs the bread from the children's table. And notice what she says. Now, there's a life lesson here. Don't get your knickers in a knot and don't get your panties in a wad. When somebody says something like that, you could get offended. And the fact of the matter is, this is what you should do. Anytime a statement is made to you and it hurts, the first thing you should do is you should say, is there anything within that statement that's true? And if there is, you could just say, thank you. Or you could say nothing. You know what she does? She doesn't get offended. She doesn't put her proverbial tail between her legs and go and hide in a corner. She said, you're right, Lord. You're right. It's the truth. Yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table. So after the food has been given to the Lord and the food has been given to the priest, even the dogs get a chance to eat from the master's table. Now, this is significant because this Syrophoenician woman, do you know what she's saying? She's not just saying, okay, well, help my daughter. What she's saying is, I want to be a part of the covenant people who get to eat at the master's table. One of my favorite stories in all the Bible is the story of Mephibosheth. I wrote to you about this a couple of weeks ago. And Mephibosheth was a child who was dropped, and then he was lame. And King David brought him and said, I'm going to have you sit at my table forever. I love that story. And it's so significant. And here's a woman who's saying, you know what? Even the dogs, I am a dog. She says, I'm a dog. That's fine. I'm a dog. There's no bones about it. But even they get to eat from the crumbs from the master's table. What she was saying is, I understand how the priests get to enjoy the crumbs that come from the master's table. Once the offerings are given to God, then they get the crumbs. They get the leftovers. And you say, well, why do they get it? Because it's their gratuity. Their gratuity for serving, for being devoted, for loving, for caring, for teaching, for praying, for ministering. Could you imagine? They're within the community. They would live around the tabernacle and they would be within, within three tribes, whether they were on the east or the south or the north or the west. And they're walking through the camp and they come over by, Aunt Jemima's house, and she ran out of pancake syrup, and she says, you know what? She's not bringing an offering, and she's got a moody, tooty, fresh and pooty attitude. The priest can't let that bother him. When somebody comes up and brings a offering that is second rate, he can't say anything about it. He gets second rate. It's like going to a restaurant and then the person, you give them great service, but they only give you a small tip. She says, I want to live at the status of those who sit at your table. That's what I want. And she says, I'm not going to complain. I'm a dog. But I just want the crumbs, just as the priests, the Levites, Aaron and his sons would get the crumbs. Not something that we think about too much. She says, I don't want to stay Canaanite. I want to be over here with full card privileges. I was sharing with a person here recently about how in Luke chapter 7, Yeshua is at Simon the leper's house. And there's a woman who comes in and washes his feet with her tears and dries his feet with her hair and anoints him with oil. And so Simon, of course, is standing over there saying, oh, if he only knew who that was doing that. And Yeshua says, he tells him a story and says to him, Simon, Let me tell you a story. There's an individual, this guy over here owed $25.13, and this guy over here owed $2,000.17. And frankly, neither one of them could pay the debt. Out of the two, who do you think would love the most? And Simon says, well, I suppose the one who is forgiven much. And he said, you're right. You've said well. See, to whom has been forgiven much, they will love much. You can find out a lot about people by the way that they love, their consistency in love, because they know they've been forgiven much. Now, both groups were forgiven. But if I don't think I've been forgiven much, I'm not going to love much. But if I recognize the grace of God and I've been forgiven a boatload of stuff, boy, I'm going to love. I'm going to love incredibly. And so this woman in Luke chapter 7, she's lavishing love on him. Simon, you know, I came in here, you didn't greet me with a kiss. Simon, I came in here, you didn't wash my feet. Simon, you didn't come in here, you didn't show me where to sit. Simon, you didn't come over here and anoint me with oil. So Simon, you didn't do that. This woman, her sins, which are many, are forgiven. Now, don't you find that interesting? How there was forgiveness of sin without blood. Very interesting. This was before Yeshua died. Because we know from the book of Hebrews, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sin. Literally no aphesis. That's the Greek term aphesis. No jubilee, no freedom without shedding of blood. And I've shared with you here recently that the book of Hebrews from chapter 1 to chapter 13, it all focuses on one day, Yom Kippur, where without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness. But if I read through the scriptures, I'm going to quickly find out that there's forgiveness of sins without blood everywhere. But we don't get that because we become myopically focused and we don't understand the panoramic view, the scope of all that is within God's economy. Well, here's a woman who is a Canaanite, but she wants full card-carrying membership privileges. She doesn't get offended when she's called a dog by the Messiah. She recognizes, I am a Gentile. I'm not part of the family of God, but I want to be a part of the family of God. I want full card-carrying privileges. I want to, like the priest, I want to eat crumbs from the master's table. Then Yeshua answered and said unto her, O woman, great is your faith. Be it unto you even as you will. I love it. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. Isn't that something? I love that. And the reason that I love that is because it speaks of the way that we should be. I mean, our entire mindset should be set in a particular way to where I recognize, okay, so I'm not a bag of chips and a whole lot more. It's true. Oh, you recognize that in me, but you want. What humility, what great faith. You know, that same story is told over in the book of Mark. So go over to Mark chapter 7 and look at verses 24 through 30. In Mark chapter 7, same story, but a little bit different. Okay, picking up in verse 25. For a certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came and fell at his feet. Now, it's interesting because there's a concept. To be a disciple, you would always sit at your rabbi's feet. And you would sit in the dust of his feet. You may remember how Yeshua said, if you go to a city and they don't receive you, to shake the dust off your feet. What does that mean? Does that mean I never come back to them again? No. It's a Hebrew idiom which says, I've been walking in the steps of the Messiah. I've been sitting in the dust of his feet. I've been learning from him, and the dust has been kicked up onto my sandals. What I've learned from walking with the master is now on my sandals. And now what I'm doing to somebody who's rejected or hasn't accepted me is I shake the dust off my feet. I'm not passing judgment on them, No, no, no. I'm giving them what the master has taught me, and I'm leaving it with them. Completely different picture, isn't it? Versus, this picture of judgment. No. It's like if they're not ready to receive, then shake the dust off their feet, off your feet, and go on. So when she comes and she falls at his feet, she falls down into the dust. She falls down. She says, I'm going to take a position of worship. I'm going to take a position of learning from you. So he says, and the woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by nation, and she brought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. But she said unto her, let the children be filled first, for it's not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to the dogs. So once again, he's coming back to this picture of the priests who are getting the breadcrumbs. And he says, okay, number one responsibility, make sure the people who are supposed to get it are going to get it. Then you can have the crumbs from the table. And he said, because if we do it in any other order, then we're not going to cast our bread to the dogs. We're not going to do it. And she answered and said unto him, yes, Lord, I'm a dog, yet the dogs eat of the children's crumbs. And he said unto her, for this saying, go your way, the devil is gone out of your daughter. And when she was come to her house, she found the devil gone out of her, and her daughter laid upon the bed. There was no shedding of blood. There wasn't any fancy things that were being done. She made a declaration of identifying who I am. And in relationship to who I am, I want you to know, I want to be this group. I want to be part of that group over there. And he goes, I haven't found so great a faith in all of Israel. I want to take you back to Numbers chapter, Leviticus chapter 6. And I'm just going to read you a couple of verses. I'm not going to go through the 24 different gratuities that were given to the priest. And by the way, we have some ministries that have just blown this way out of proportion. They're flying private jets. They've got, multi-million dollar mansions. A little bit not intended for what God intended. That's my personal opinion. Verse 18, all the males among the children of Israel shall eat of it. It shall be a statute forever in your generations concerning the offering of the Lord made by fire. Everyone that touches them shall be holy. So Aaron and his sons were going to get an opportunity to eat of the grain offering, the meal offering from Leviticus chapter 2 as their food. And then he says down in verse 26 regarding the sin offering, the hatat offering, the priest that offers it for sin shall eat it in the holy place and shall be eaten in the court of the tabernacle of the congregation. Whatsoever shall touch the flesh thereof shall be holy. So now whoever it is that shecks the animal and takes his blood, does the preparation, he gets to eat that meat from that animal. He gets the crumbs from the table. If I pick up in verse 8 of chapter 7, and the priest that offers any man's burnt offering, even the priest shall have to himself the skin of the burnt offering which he has offered. Because remember, with the korban olah, burnt offering, nobody gets to eat it. It's all for God. But he gets the skins of that. Look down at verse 15. And the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offerings for thanksgiving shall be eaten the same day it's offered. He shall not leave any of it until the morning. Look at verse 23. You shall eat no manner of fat of ox or of sheep or of goat. So he gets to eat all these things, but then he doesn't get to eat of the fat because the fat belongs to the Lord. The fat belongs to the abundance. Now remember, at the very beginning of this Torah portion, it says, command Zav, Aaron and his sons. But I want you to look at chapter 7, verse 38. In verse 38, he says, which the Lord commanded Moses in Mount Sinai in the day that he commanded the children of Israel to offer their oblations unto the Lord in the wilderness of Sinai. Now, you and I would just read this and we'd go, okay, great, no big deal. Okay, so the Lord had Moses tell the people these things. Do you understand that the reason why the Lord told Moses to teach this to the children of Israel, it's not because they were going to be doing it. It's because the Lord wanted Moses to tell the people, you need to know how hard these people work on your behalf. And that's why he's teaching the people, which is amazing. And that's exactly the way that it's supposed to be. And that's the way it's supposed to be in our lives. See, as sheep who have shepherds over us, who are feeding us, teaching us, loving us, praying for us, ministering to us, caring for us, it's my responsibility to know what they're doing so that I can give them the gratuity that they deserve. Teaching the Torah, offering up the korbanot, giving me the privilege of being able to come to the altar. Go back to the book of Exodus. I want you to go to Exodus chapter 29, and I'm going to end with this for the evening. In Exodus chapter 29, I want verse 37, but then I want verse 43 after that. In verse 37, 7 days you shall make an atonement for the altar, a covering for the altar. And it shall be an altar most holy. So this altar, which is sitting out in the outer court area, it's going to be equivalent to the Kadosh Kedoshim, the most holy. And he says, and whatever touches the altar shall be holy. It'll be set apart. Now look just a few verses down the road and look over there at verse 43. In verse 43, he says, with these offerings that are being brought, he says, and there, speaking at the altar, pay close attention, and there will I meet with the children of Israel, and the tabernacle shall be sanctified by my glory. Wow. Why would anybody want to bring a korban, an offering, to the Lord? It wasn't mandatory. They're already saved. They've already been saved by the blood of the Lamb, but they're in covenant relationship. And now they've all worked together to build a tabernacle, and the glory of the Lord has filled the tabernacle so much that nobody can even come in. Not even Moses. So God says, but I want you to come in. And the way that he wants them to come in is he says, but there's specific ways. If you come in and if you want to come and visit with me, and if you want to come to the altar and you want me to meet with you there, the Lord God, the one who is on Mount Sinai, who the people were scared to death of, who's going to meet with the individual who brings the korbanot, who brings the offering, that's anything but bondage. Go back and think in your own life. You ever been to a concert or you ever been to an event where you just knew the Lord showed up and he spoke to you? Could you imagine what it's like to have him manifest himself in a cloud? To come down and meet with you and speak with you and meet your needs for the entire time that you're there with your offering? I'd say, Mom, let's do it again. Mom, let's do it again. Mom, let's do it again. Keep coming. It was expensive. And we'll talk more about that this coming Friday. Well, let me end the call and open it up for any comments or any questions that you might have. And of course, since most are, nearly everyone will be watching this on repeat, all you have to do is just, if you got a question, send me a question on your email. And that'll be great. By the way, thanks to Lima, who is a precious lady in the UK. She has been working tirelessly on getting everything on the lightentorah.org website and YouTube channel all shored up. She's doing an amazing job. I'm praising God for her. Okay, I'll end the call and wish you a great beginning of your week and open it up for any questions. Shalom.